Anyone else hate when you're playing an RPG and then the DM is like, what was the name of the town 5 miles over that the dragon mentioned? And you're like, you tell me, DM, you're the one who made it up. And then he's like, no, you're supposed to take notes. You might be like me, a lazy D&D player. I'm going to give you some tips for playing D&D as a lazy player. Tip number 1 would be play Baldur's Gate 3. If you're a lazy player like me, it's not going to be hard to convince you to play a video game. Baldur's Gate 3 is 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Not quite to a T with a few alterations, but it is phenomenal for learning every class in the game. And it moves so much faster than actual 5th edition because you don't have to wait on other people's turns. And you get to play as all these different classes. And your turns are all your turns. It's a fantastic way to see all of the spells in action, and it's also a fantastic way to see how combat can be done in a dynamic way instead of just people standing around whacking each other in turns until one of them loses all their hit points. Tip number 2, if you're a spellcaster and you have to read through 5 to 10 different spells, a fantastic way to alleviate this problem is to get these spell cards. These are phenomenal for having them in front of you and quickly referencing what you want to use. If you're playing pencil and paper, even if you're not, it's helpful to have a physical reminder there in front of you. Speaking of that, maybe you're like me and you get a magic item from the DM, and then 2 sessions after that, you forget you had it. The DM is like, if only someone had a key or a key-shaped sword that could open this. And I'm just like, yeah, that'd be fantastic. And he's like, look at your inventory. And I'm like, I did. I only see 3 sacks of rice and a bag of holding. And he's like, look in the bag of holding. And I'm like, I did look in the bag of holding, and I only see the corpses of all 500 people we've killed up to this point. And he's like, yeah, but you put a sword in there. And I'm like, I did? And he's like, yeah, it's called the Sword of Unlocking. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot because it didn't unlock anything I tried to use it on. And he's like, well, yeah, you should have. Anyway, all you have to do is look through your cards instead of clicking through tabs or searching through a list. They're right there in front of you. They've all got their description on there. It's phenomenal for quickly referencing and not forgetting items that you have. Another solution is, especially if you're new to the game, spellcasting can be complicated. If you're playing a druid, not only do you have to know your spells, you also have to have different stat blocks you're managing for anytime you wild shape. It's a lot to keep track of. So I recommend sometimes just keep it simple. Just pick a fighter if you're set on playing a spellcaster. I recommend looking up RPG bot and seeing what spells are best for what classes. It is phenomenal for giving you very versatile spells instead of having to read through every spell in the game or every spell available to your character. Just find the ones that are the best, take those as a starting point, and then branch out from there. That's how I've done it, and I highly recommend it, especially if you're lazy like me. Who doesn't love unconventionally shaped dice? A collection of these, it's so much fun. A freaking paper character sheet and these cards in front of you, it makes the game so much cooler. And the minis and the physical terrain, all this stuff, so much fun. It does slow the game down quite a bit though. I highly recommend, if you're new, digital character sheets. And you can say, oh, D&D Beyond and WotC, but there's also Demiplane's 5th edition character sheets that you can give a try. There's plenty of other resources, and by plenty I mean at least one other besides Demiplane and D&D Beyond. But honestly, I use D&D Beyond. That's actually how I learned, and I highly recommend starting out. D&D Beyond is fantastic. It has it all in one place. If you don't know what something is, you click on it, and then there's the description right in front of you. Super easy, streamlined inventory management. It actually does the encumbrance for you, which is famously one of the most obnoxious rules in the game. Makes all that super easy to manage. On that note, say you have to wait for any number of reasons, and it's not combat, it's a shopping episode and someone else is doing their thing, or someone went into a different room than you and you have to wait for the DM to resolve that interaction. What if, instead of just checking out and waiting for it to come back to you, you start interacting with other players at the table. Hear me out. Unless you're doing something that affects the story or something that actually requires you to roll to see what happens, you can just talk to the other characters. Some of my friends' favorite parts of the game have just been these moments where they spur of the moment just have a social interaction with their fellow party members. Most GMs I know are gonna love that sort of thing and highly encourage it. If you have a GM who doesn't, I recommend respecting that, but also maybe they're a control freak. I don't know, that's up for you to figure out, you and Reddit. All that to say, if you feel like not a lot is happening and you're just waiting around, just take some agency, actually do stuff. As long as it's not something the GM needs to be involved in, go for it. If it doesn't come up to a story decision, you should feel free to just have fun interactions in character. Isn't that why a lot of us play these games to start with? Say you have an idea for a character you always wanted to pretend to be. You can look up if anyone has built something like that on the internet. YouTube is a fantastic resource for that. On that same note, talk to other players at the table when you're making your character. It's so much more fun when you actually link your character's backstory to other characters in the party. Just run it by other people in your group, and they will probably have plenty of advice on things you should do, maybe even inspiration for things you can try out. Last but not least, when it comes to actually taking notes, first off, I keep notes very simply these days. I only handwrite specific things that I really want to get in my memory. If you've been to college, you just start to recognize that if someone makes a specific mention of something, that's something you should write down. I don't type things out anymore. I don't love doing that. It always just made me feel like I had to stop playing the game to do homework. Instead, now I record sessions on my phone. Transcription with voice recording is fantastic. Once you have that whole thing transcribed, copy paste it into ChatGPT, or if you're on Google, Gemini, and it will give you a bullet point summary of all the important things that happened. Sometimes the session is too long, but that's fine. You can just copy paste that whole thing into a Google Doc and you can search for keywords, or you can take it chunk by chunk and have it broken down. It's so much faster than actually typing all of it out. It's not great for remembering things, which is why I would defer back to the handwriting, but this is so good for actually having a reference document of everything that's happened throughout your campaign. I have mixed feelings about using AI. Yes, I'm not using it to actually generate ideas or anything like that, but you are still using it. You're training their large language models by doing this. But that is a subject for a different video. There you have it, some tips for lazy players like me. Let me know in the comments below if any of these are helpful for you, if there's any other suggestions that you've thought of. That's all I've got for today. This is not D&D. I'm not a nerd. Goodbye. I love you.